THQ is what you get when you have a toy company that thinks they can make games. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here checking out all the games from THQ for the Super Nintendo. We're going to rank them along the way according to my own personal opinions. And if you're new to the channel, thank you so much for watching. I do at least 2 videos a week. Make sure you're subscribed. This is part of a regular series I do, but I always do other videos too. And when I hit 100,000 subscribers, I'm going to do a contest where I put someone in their very own Nintendo homebrew, and it could be you. So make sure you're subscribed for your first chance to win. Well, the Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle for some reason had kind of a resurgence in the 90s, for a little while anyway. I mean, it was always kind of on reruns. It was one of those, like, I would watch it like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., on whatever channel. And I like Rocky and Bullwinkle. I actually quite like the cartoon quite a bit. But with like the new one and everything, and then they made a platformer based on this, it was not a good look. It controlled terribly, controlled awkwardly. There's plenty of references in there too, and you know, make no mistake about THQ not knowing what they're dealing with. There's a ton of references in this game if you're a huge fan of Rocky and Bullwinkle. So I'll give it that, and that's about all I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it a D. There's the Great Waldo search. Right up front, way better than the Nintendo version. Right? There's 2 Nintendo versions, but this one, the Great Waldo search, I mean, it's Where's Waldo? I mean, it's Where's Waldo, right? But it's also like it's more than just that. It's more than just Where's Waldo. Then there's a part where you can fly as the dog and collect the bones. You can collect the little time things along the way to make it so you have more time to experience. They could still do a lot with a Where's Waldo game, even by today, and I wish they would. I'd love it if they brought back Where's Waldo in a new style of game. However, this game, I mean, I still play it every once in a while just for fun. I'm putting it as a C. How about that? There's a couple of Home Alone games, and both of them are pretty terrible. But the first Home Alone game, I think, is more terrible than the other one. It's just, they had the idea of a game. It's like, oh, we have to make a Home Alone game. I mean, it's so popular. I mean, the movie's everything. The movie's just like, oh my God, Macaulay Culkin and everything. And then they came out with this game. It's not E.T. standards, and trust me, I like E.T. for the Atari 2600, but like going from the E.T. movie to the E.T. game, and you go from the Home Alone movie to them saying, oh, we need a Home Alone game, it reminds me a little bit like that. This game, almost unplayable, but it is kind of playable. And there is a little bit going on that makes it so it's like, you know, you can pop it in just to see what people are talking about. It's a D. And even though in Home Alone 2, which I think controls better, and I think it acts a little bit better too, it's just not perfect still. And when I say not perfect, I mean not much better than the first one. I did play this one. I remember renting this game, and I remember beating it back in the day. I haven't beat it since then. But I did play all the way through this game, and I'm still putting it as a D. It's, I mean, you know, I don't know. Come on. James Bond Jr. was an animated series based on the young James Bond, which wasn't really like James Bond. It was like some dude, like some kid, who I think didn't even have a British accent or anything like that. It was like some kid who was just James Bond Jr. and he had these cool gadgets. Not very James Bond-like outside of having gadgets and doing secret spy stuff, which wasn't really spy stuff, really. It was during a time when cartoons just seemed rushed. Like they were just like trying to just pump them out as quick as they could, and I mean, maybe they were, I don't know. I did watch the cartoon a little bit, not much, but I played this Super Nintendo game too, and there is a Nintendo game, the NES version. Super Nintendo version actually plays a lot better. I actually don't mind the Super Nintendo version that much. I'm putting James Bond Jr., me personally, I'll put it as a C. It's better than some of the other games on the list. There are some things that they could have fixed with it, but it's actually a pretty decent game. It's decent. The Lawn Mower Man was one of those movies that kind of, you know, it was the Matrix of its time, wasn't it? Like as far as like special effects go, because you never mind the dumb story behind the movie. You just wanted to see all the VR stuff. You just wanted to see all the computer-generated animated stuff, because that really wasn't a thing back in those days. And you're like, oh man, I want to be inside a computer. I want to like do stuff like that. You can in this game, but it starts out as a shooter first. So you got to do the shooting part first. It plays like a typical THQ style shooter. It's nothing to write home about. But the fun part of this game was kind of doing that kind of 3D flying through the computer, what virtual reality was at the time. I would love it if someone had a Lawn Mower Man VR game, just so I could experience, you know, this movie, taking it all the way back. But once you're done with that, then it's back to the shooting part again. And the shooting part isn't bad, but it's okay, and the shooting part's actually okay. But the flying around, that was the mind-blowing, like, oh my god, you can do this in video games. Interesting. And that was even for Super Nintendo back in the day. Crazy. It's crazy to see where we came from and where we are now. I'm going to put this game as a B. Pit Fighter. Oh, man. Where do I start? Pit Fighter at the arcade? Pit Fighter for the Sega Genesis? Pit Fighter for the Super Nintendo? No. They changed so much of it, so much of what I loved about the arcade version, and they still use like the motion capture, I guess, but it's no, and like some of the moves aren't even there, and it's like, you know, it just turns into a button mashing nonsense. No, I'm putting this game as an F. Race driving, again, decent in the arcade. It was fun to see because it was that 3D element, like, you know, 3D, you know, like with polygons and all that, you know, with the loop-de-loop track, and I think this one had a corkscrew and stuff like that in it, and it just ran so slow on the Super Nintendo. It was just like frame by frame, and you're just like, you know, turning the corners, you couldn't quite align yourself because you're already too aligned because how the game works, and hard to play on the Super Nintendo. I'm also giving this an F. They had count 'em, four Ren and Stimpy games for the Super Nintendo, and they were all from THQ, and all of them play kind of differently too, so that's interesting. But if you loved Ren and Stimpy back in the day, it was one of the greatest, man. It really was, and it's so full of references. So you want to play it, you want to keep playing it to see what's going to happen next. You want to keep playing it because you want to see if your favorite character or favorite reference is going to be in this game. I believe Vidiot's was first, and it was an okay for its time, for what you knew what you were getting into with a THQ kind of game. I'm putting it as a C, but you know. There's Ren and Stimpy Buckaroos, which actually isn't that bad of a game. This one's pretty, I shouldn't say pretty decent. It's okay. As far as platforming goes, you know, enemies are predictable. It's one of those kind of games, but it's still, as far as, to me, this one, at least to me, and again, this might just be me, but I want to say this one plays better than the other two. And I know the other two are still a little bit different from what they are, with like how things are controlled and everything, but Buckaroos ain't bad. I'm going to put this one as a B. And I think Time Warp may have been next. And this game, again, plays kind of similarly, but it's a little bit different and a little bit else going on that makes it like a different kind of game, but still kind of the same game, if that makes any sense whatsoever. It probably doesn't. But it's another Ren and Stimpy game. So if you love the game, I mean, they're probably just capitalizing on anybody who bought anything. The grown people who bought the toys and adults and all that, you know, they're the ones who are going to be buying this game anyway. So like, hey, well, we'll make something. We'll make some money off of it. I'll put this one as a C as well. We had Ren and Stimpy Fire Dogs for some reason, and this one was a little bit interesting because it was almost like mini games in a way. You play as, you know, one of the elements, like when you first start playing it, you try to fill in the missing spots on the fire truck, like the hose, the boots, the rope, stuff like that. You have to find them and then put them on the fire truck, and then you're good. And then there's another element where you're capturing things that are falling out of the building, as Ren and Stimpy both. Back and forth. So it doesn't play quite like a platformer or anything like that. It's just just kind of a fun for fun game. I don't know. I'm going to put this one also as a C. Road Riot 4-Wheel Drive was a game for the Super Nintendo by THQ. It's also an arcade, and the arcade was pretty cool. You drive along, and you can shoot the other enemies. The Super Nintendo version, same idea, but like runs at 15 frames a second. I mean, it's rough on the frame rate, and because of that, I'm putting this game as an F. And yes, I mean it's almost unplayable to me. I mean, you can kind of play it, but man, it's not a good look, even back then. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is a game I literally rented once, maybe even twice. But it's also because I was babysitting my nephew at the time, so I mean, gotta have something to play, right? This game, it's full of little childlike mini games. There's a sliding puzzle. There's a little story that you can read or click on the words, and it'll tell you what that word is if you need help. What the word is. I mean, it's just fun little things featuring Thomas the Tank Engine and his fellow friends. And Sir Topham Hatt is my spirit animal, and I don't know where I'm going with this. It's actually a pretty decent game for kids at the time, because there wasn't a whole lot of like youth-based games. And this one, I mean, based on the fact that my nephew played it for a while, I mean, I'll give it a C. Time Trax was a TV show that not a lot of people remember today. It came out like early to mid 90s. I guess it'd have to be for a Super Nintendo game, right? Of course it would come out in the early to mid 90s. That's when the Super Nintendo was out. It was a decent show, you know, sci-fi elements. I didn't really watch it a whole lot, but I did like the Super Nintendo game quite a bit. It played like a decent kind of running, action-y, shooting kind of game. You can find these little hidden areas and get more power-ups, and I mean, I thought it was okay. I'm actually gonna put this one as a B. Yeah. Man, did you ever watch Time Trax? I mean, I watched a little bit of it. I don't even remember what channel it was on. Was it Sci-Fi? I don't remember. Well, capitalizing on The Lion King without being The Lion King, we had Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Games, and this is just a small collection of some mini games you can play. There's a pinball, which acts super janky. There is no momentum or I mean, the pinball is not great. There's this Frogger-looking game that doesn't really play like Frogger. You just move back and forth to collect the bugs as much as you can. It's a high score getter. This would have been the perfect like one-day rental. You don't get this for 2 days if you're renting games back in the day. Don't get it for 2 days. Don't get it for the weekend. Do not get it for 5 days. You just need the one-day overnight rental for this game. You'll play all of it all at once. You'll be like, okay, well that was that. It's pretty bad. It's a D. Oh, Wayne's World. Better than the NES version by a long shot. Better than the NES version by a long shot. It's just a game that just gets annoying because they're trying to use all the elements of what makes Wayne's World. So it has not just kind of the captured graphics, I guess, or the, you know, just how they look. It reminds me a little bit of like Journey. Remember Journey, the arcade game, where you use like, you know, it's like the band members' heads on these bodies. This kind of reminds me a little bit like that. It's even about music too. But then like for everything you get, there's a sound effect, there's a voice, there's a quote. So he's constantly, you know, you get sick of his voice real quick. Again, not as bad as the NES version, but it's still pretty janky. I'm gonna put this one as a D as well. THQ for Super Nintendo, man alive. And if you missed out on other videos like this, I did one for LGN, also did some great companies like Square, like Enix, a lot of Nintendo companies, and still more videos coming out soon, like Data East for the NES, like Taito for the NES. More Super Nintendo games, gotta do some Genesis games on this collection as well, as we move forward with this playlist, with this you know, kind of YouTube series, if you will. So let me know what you think in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, always something new coming out soon. Thank you for being you.